In 1966, in a radio talk for children, Foucault evoked the idea of other spaces. Those countries without place, histories without chronology, cities, planets, and universes, untraceable on any map or heaven, simply because they do not belong to any space. There were, however, Foucault went on certain kinds of utopic spaces that could be situated in real space and real time. One does not live in a neutral and white space. One does not live, die, or love within the rectangle of a sheet of paper. There are regions of passages, streets, trains, subways. There are regions open to momentary pause, such as cafes, cinemas, beaches, hotels, and then there are the closed regions of rest and being at home. Yet, among these places, they are distinguished from each other. There are those that are absolutely different, places that are opposed to all the others, that are destined in some way to efface them, neutralize them, and purify them. These are in some way counter spaces. These counter spaces, these are localized utopias. Common to all counter spaces is their physical presence survival upon their primary function death. Seemingly, counter spaces are useless. But who is the user of the counter space? However, visible physical decay materializes operations that are normally state hidden, namely political and financial forces which direct occupation and creation of space. In that sense, counter spaces are anomalies which resist being categorized as luxurious assets in the spatial trade. Their visible imperfect state functions to obstruct the order of things. Even without an assigned patron, without an architect who could repair anomaly, and without public approval glorification, counter spaces are actors in space. This particular function indeed lacked terminology. The term ruins implies the state of the object, while counter spaces territories act more like subjects. With their imperfect presence, they repetitively interrupt the context in which they are placed, regardless from what their prescribed function should be. We should look into places that our spatial practice usually classifies as its own debris. We have chosen several case studies where the standard criterion of ordering space fails. These are unprofitable, worthless territories from the point of view of the mainstream urban planning. The detected objects map margins where the criteria of a profitable space cannot be exercised and where the world as it is reaches its limits. Such counter-territories usually fail to sustain themselves for long. The final act of elimination or replacement is exercised by a soft power. They are either revitalized by the injection of a commercial program or led to extinction by the slow decay that lasts for years. The curious case of Remisa in Nova Gorica, an ancient engine shed depot that was taken over by a shopping mall depot, is in fact an example of the common urban incident of favoring suburbs over cities. Such an incident happens when the object's original function faces an expiration date. Remisa firm structure surpassed the dead of its function in 2006 when Slovenian Railways sold the railway area. Since then, Remisa has entered the realm of real estate trades, ending under the ownership of Austrian Supernova, which means that its value was determined solely in terms of the business deals. Hence, for the following 13 years, the place had been nothing but a poor investment, defined in the media by the cost of renovation and maintenance and the distressing pictures of the stripped interior. The predicted cost proved to be an unbearable burden in 2017 when Nova Gorica's councils rejected the city administration plan to rent the building from GFI Real Estate over a 40 years period. The initiative to reprogram the building with creative activities, which would open it for public use, failed. As a result, the place was renovated to host a furniture store. To claim any architectural, historical, and cultural qualities as relevant and deciding factors contributing to Remisa potential with the above context seems naive. Such treatment of one of the oldest buildings in Nova Gorica has its spatial manifestations. The building was rejected as a leftover place. Its unsightly emptiness caused a public trauma. The building renovation was done regardless of Remisa's specificities. Semicircular, wide open space is now closed and fragmented. The original steel roof structure is hidden and possibly destroyed. By the suspended ceiling, the celestial light coming from the roof windows is lost, and all openings are covered by discount announcements. Even though the unique Remisa interior is replaced with a generic white box, renovation is accepted with enforced optimism. At least the ugly ruin is repaired now and the trauma is healed. But why is it so that the ruin irritates more than yet another shopping mall? At the moment, due to its repaired and preserved historical facade, Remisa is seemingly still in place. Nonetheless, it is actually displaced. The object built to serve as a machine depot was not at all just an instrumental hut where repairmen dealt with dirtiness. The manner in which it was constructed, its scale and atmosphere now present only in the pictures, could in its original form and materiality host any human activity. Remisa's interior was a distinct place, unlike any other in the near vicinity. It was a memorable place. Now it is cleaned of all its particularities to adjust to the monotonous shopping and has become a place nobody remembers. This is the preservation strategy at its best. It repairs useless places by making them unmemorable. It is how the displacement of a place, an incident from the beginning of the text, is practiced. Last but not the least, in the praise of a resilient Remisa's ruin, which had opposed the shopping mall for more than a decade, let me advocate in the name of the ruin's function. The ruin's role is not in its romanticized or dangerous decay, but in its unfinished state. It is the state which passers-by engage in thinking about what could or should be there instead. It is out of the dissatisfaction with the ruin's unfinished state that the reconstruction and the public debate arise. The emancipation is in the potential of a ruin to be anything else but a ruin if corrected, repaired, or finished. It is the moment when someone imagines its reconstruction that the ruin belongs to everybody. On the other hand, the Remisa of today has a brand new facade which should persuade us, or all the passers-by, that there is nothing left to be repaired or retaught. The area of a former rogue bicycle factory has been a place of an urban conflict for a long time. After the demise of the industry in the 90s, the complex was abandoned. As a result of the transition and transformation of the system towards a market economy, many publicly owned spaces have been left unused or abandoned, alongside an absence of urban development policies and the policies concerning use of such spaces. In 2006, ROG became a squat, named an Autonomous Cultural Zone ROG, a center of artistic, humanistic, activistic, and radical thought, hosting numerous individuals and associations, migrants, activists, cultural programs, protests, and Amnesty International, among others. Occupation initiated by the students of drama school, who had no other venue to exercise. They were joined later by activists, artists, and others in an active response to privatization and deindustrialization happening after the demise of Yugoslavia. When it comes to self-sustained collectives and counter-spaces, ROG was the strongest example of both. However, its proximity to the city center always presents a huge potential for the speculative city investments. There were several competitions for the area, but never realized. Collective tried to claim the ownership over the complex, as it was left to decay by municipality by decades, but their efforts were unsuccessful. After the long-lasting court battle, including 8 cases, the collective lost and received the order to leave the space. They rejected to do so, but during Corona lockdown, forceful eviction of ROG was finally realized. Special police forces were paid to throw ROG inhabitants and their ateliers out of the complex. The fact that it was happening during Corona lockdown, when culture had no space to be and to act, is even more devastating. Now the strategy of cleaning up the history of the place is executed. Autonomous culture is replaced by curated culture. Culture, which was thriving on the basis of informal contract between ROG residents, is replaced by exclusive culture. Now you need to apply to the highly curated open calls that serves creative industry ideologies, only to get into 1 out of 7 ateliers places. This renovation, instead of supporting independent cultural scene, did just the opposite. It gave definition to what a culture should be by shrinking both range of topics and physical space for workers. Instead of a squat, there is now brand new regulated cultural center. There is also a rebranding campaign going on, promoting ROG Lab with vegan food, good causes, sustainability, community orientation, etc. Last but not the least, in what is the most twisted move to manipulate public debate, in front of the new ROG Cultural Center there will be a memorial park called Park of the Erased. Not all of those erased from the place, but to a particular group of people, mainly from other former Yugoslav republics that remained without a legal status after the declaration of the country's independence in 1991. Now, public debate is not anymore centered in the forceful eviction of autonomous cultural scene, but whether the those erased deserve the memorial park. Turning autonomous factory ROG into the ROG Lab is the use of a creative class to gentrify the whole area. The rise of creative class hit on what now seems blindingly obvious, that clustering force of young creatives and tech workers in metropolitan areas was leading to greater economic prosperity. This is a well-known move and widely applied urban model that regenerates former industrial facilities into the places of creative hubs, performative arts, exhibitions, pop-up events, library shops, hipster cafes. This is a culture in service of a very particular urban regeneration. It provides a program for degraded areas, but in the aftermath, it inevitably increases the value of land and cost of surrounding real estate. With the shift in a socio-political context from socialism to an open market economy that took place after the separation of Yugoslavia, it became common practice that state-owned land was either transformed into privately owned real estate or left abandoned for an indefinite period of time. As a result, some prominent cityscapes that had previously accommodated public infrastructure, industry or military applications were reproposed, and following the 2008 crisis, kept in a state of never-finished construction sites. Two of such spaces meet at the intersection of Dunajska and Topniška streets in Ljubljana, the stadium made by architect Plečnik to the north and the Krater to the south. What both of these places have in common is that they exist in a state of incompleteness, represented by a specific typology of space that is not defined by spatial regulations. Furthermore, in the past, the press often portrayed both of these places as a problematic, posing a threat to otherwise well-managed city and burdening its residents. In spatial planning, incompleteness is regarded as a status to be resolved, an anomaly that needs to be eliminated through the injection of controlled programs and regulations of ownership structures. This state of spatial incompleteness is essentially perceived as abandonment, neglect, and a lack of hygiene. The battle surrounding Plečnik Stadium development lasts 15 years. There is quite some fuss about the project. The stadium was not included into UNESCO list of Plečnik works due to the poor maintenance, which significantly damaged its physical structure. Simultaneously, it's under the highest state of protection, the monument of national significance. However, the Heritage Institute gave green light for the invasive development. Numerous architects, art historians, artists, and other citizens constantly publicly criticized the development. In its last exhibition, artist Jože Barši claimed that the stadium should be left as it is, to be taken over by nature. First, the development was blocked by the Ministry of the Environment and Spatial Planning, as it would cause unbearable noise pollution to the nearby neighbors. Lastly, the neighbors won the court battle, and for now, the development stopped. But the community and the municipality have very, very different ideas on what the city growth should be. Municipality vision is well illustrated in several development plans for Krater and its surrounding sites. First, the maps fail to see Krater and Bežigrad Stadium as green. They only record maintained city greens, for example parks, areas of recreation, etc. We have no tool to record this status in between of feral lands. Bežigrad area lacks public spaces and parks. However, alongside the Dunajska street, there was a large development planned in the Krater neighborhood plots. First, Plečnik Stadium is sold to private investor who planned conglomerate of hybrid program offices, sports, parking houses that would completely change the scale and ambiences of this part of the city. Some 10 years later, Petrol Corporation undertook most ambitious futuristic projects, some contemporary ziggurat with Bosco Verticale on its facades on the opposing side. Both these developments were the result of land speculations. Krater is, however, until now state-owned, the reason why it will host Palace of Justice. However, the architectural competition for the Palace of Justice completely neglected 80,000 square meters of Krater's self-sustained nature and planned its extinction in order to be replaced with grass and tree lines and a large development which would go 4 stories into the ground and 12 stories above the ground of the Palace of Justice. Crater case is not unique. It's a recognizable practice of reproducing urban life by cleaning up unsightly mess, whether spontaneous nature, squatting, homeless, or any other mess. The set of conditions used to classify areas such as ownership, plot size, other urban regulations, moves the actual multi-species crater behind visible. While invisible on planning documents, these spaces as crater, which are largely overlooked yet highly productive green spaces, have the capacity to regulate the climate, enhance biodiversity, provide irreplaceable ecological infrastructure, and give rise to research platforms for learning about ecocultural regeneration. Feral, as practiced by Crater Collective, is the concept of self-reliant resistance, uninvited action, and unforeseen future. It is not only the emergence of unplanned ecosystems where pioneering and invasive plants stimulate new biotic and spatial relationships, it is a political, living practice that interferes with the notions of context, user, zoning, and the mainstream planning, while exposing existing administrative framework of urban regulations as insufficient. The feral defines the gap between administrative spatial regulations, which legitimize the destruction of the spontaneous nature in the cities, and the actual potential of such areas for the regeneration of urban biodiversity. On a societal level, we are currently struggling to establish adequate mechanism for vaporizing regenerative function of urban nature. Feral could help us as something which was domesticated and later went out of control. In this sense, it's a concept of resistance, as it supports regenerative processes but also diversifies city ambience and allows for self-organized association to situate their practices and redefine the notion of the ground use. However, current administration and planning practices does not seem to have political will, mechanisms, or knowledge to include untamed territories as new typology of urban planning. They just fix the problem, and by fixing it means paving it, setting some poor trees in lines, design nature by controlling it with composition principles, completely neglecting complexity of biodiversity. If the citizens' roles is often limited solely to the consumers and admirers of urban parks and forests, then these anthropogenic ecosystems populated with invasive and other feral plants, human infrastructures, and fugitive compounds ask for active, attentive engagement. They call for a new generation of care workers to practice slow disturbance through the nurturing of interspecies collaborations, able to recognize the educational, ecological, and cultural value of spontaneous ecologies. Instead of treating them as precarious landscapes on the road to extinction at the hands of human-centric infrastructures, Crater Collective explores feral ecosystems as a creative laboratories of multi-species encounters and care, but also as an important spaces of city resistance.